Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Budget Finance Committee meeting for the City of Franklin. This is Thursday, April the 10th, 2025, and it is 3 p.m. We will begin the meeting with a call to order, and we'll do that with a roll call vote. Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Present.
Alderman Baggett, how do you vote?
Present.
And Alderman Potts, how do you vote?
Present.
And the chair votes present on that. Next item on the agenda is setting of the agenda. Anyone have any corrections, deletions, changes to the agenda? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
I move to approve.
Proper motion, is there a second?
Second.
Let's do a roll call vote on that also. Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Alderman Potts, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Alderman Baggett, how do you vote?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes to that also. We do have an item on that citizen comments. If there's any citizen that wishes to comment on any item that I guess is not on the agenda, come forward to the podium and we'll give you an opportunity to speak. If not, you will be given an opportunity to speak as that item comes up on the agenda. Seeing none, let's go to approval of the minutes. Consideration of approval of minutes for the March 6, 2025 Budget and Finance Committee and the March 20th, 2025 Budget and Finance Committee. Hope there's no additions, deletions, corrections. If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve the minutes.
Proper motion to a second.
Second.
There is a second. Let's do a roll call vote on that also. Alderman Peterson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Alderman Potts, how do you vote?
Yes.
Alderman Baggett, how do you vote?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes on that also. The third item on the agenda is new business, and it's appropriations to outside agencies. Michael, you're up.
Good afternoon. Michael Walters Young, your Chief Budget Performance Officer. With me today is financial analyst from my office, the Office of Budget and Performance, Norma Lockney. And she supervises the appropriations to outside agencies process for the city. So I'm going to let Norma take it from here and follow her lead. And then I know we've got some of our partners and individuals and groups that want to be our partners that are in the audience. So without further ado, Norma, take it away.
Thank you. Good afternoon. First, I'd like to say hello to all the representatives to the outside agencies who are here with us today. So we thank them for coming and taking their time to do this. So as you know, we give funding yearly to outside agencies based on what they request. We do it at a base budget funding level. And we also have a PER for those that are increasing in amounts. And we will get to those in the next slides. So just as a reminder, we have 501c3s. Those are the most common nonprofits that you're going to see. It's been approved by the IRS as a tax-exempt charitable organization. And it's organized and operated exclusively for religious, charitable, scientific, testing for public safety, literacy, educational, or other specified purpose. We also have 501c4s and 501c6s, which are nonprofit civic organizations that have been approved by the IRS, which direct their efforts at promoting the common economic interest of all commercial enterprises in a trade or community. And then we have various government agencies within Williamson County and the city of Franklin that also we give funding to. So our base budget for fiscal year 2025 was $703,302. For this year, it's $712,807. And the difference is an increase of $9,505 or 1.35%. So of course that's at that level funded area, except for 5 of them. And so one of them is animal control, which is $9,968 of that. Because we like for them to help us with our animals. We have the health department, which is an increase of $690. And then we have a couple who actually decreased their requests over last year, which was Community Housing Partnership, the Cemetery, and Transit Alliance. So there's a graph of how we've helped the local organizations throughout the years. And it's just a small increase over 2025 as far as for that base level funding. So in addition to these existing requests, we have 16 requests that have increased the amount that they are requesting. They're divided into 3 categories. So 1 are additional requests for the government agencies, 2 is additional requests for civic organizations, and 3 is for new agency requests for funding. So you can see here the first category is government agencies. The library is asking for an increase of $31,473. That's for inflation and for additional materials. We were told that they're very big into digital materials, and it costs a lot of money. In order to help patrons not have, long hold times on some of those digital products, then they would like to get that additional funding. Then we have the Tennessee Rehab Clinic, who is also increasing by $690, which is basically inflationary, for a total of $32,163 for the increase for government agencies. So these are our civic organizations, and as you can see, most of them are inflationary. There are a few that have an increased need, such as GraceWorks and One Generation Away, just based on some of their programs that they're offering. The big one is Sister Cities at $30,559. They're requesting a new part-time coordinator position and 1 additional sister city, so they're looking to reach out into Spain. So that total comes to $60,122. And then we have some new agency requests. So African American Heritage Society, you saw this last year. We did award them $50,000, but they have requested another $100,000 this year. So even though technically they're not new, it was an unexpected request that we were getting.
Last year's was an unexpected request.
Last year and this year, yes. So that's why we put it in new funding, even though we did fund them for $50,000 last year. The Doorstep Project, it's a new request for $12,000, and they provide transitional housing for those leaving Bridges. So once they've gone to that program, which Bridges is one of those ones that were on the list that we do currently fund, once they leave that program, then they have some transitional housing that they can provide. ShareBuilt is requesting $50,000. They provide pro bono capital project management services to nonprofits in Franklin. And as most of you have probably seen in the factory, the Studio 10 Theater Company, they have a new request of $20,000. And that total for all the new agency requests comes to $182,000. So between the government agencies, the outside civic organizations, and the new agency requests, the total that will be increased over last year would be $274,285.
I would also add that there are several of those 501c4s and C6s that don't appear in this budget that would go through this process. So the Chamber funding is budgeted in economic development, but they go through the same process, the same sort of criterion that we use to evaluate their funding requests, as well as the Convention and Visitors Bureau. That funding is budgeted in the Hotel Motel Fund. But they also, again, go through this same process, and we vet their information and their financials on an annual basis. But you won't see it in this funding request. That's correct. You've already actually seen those requests in previous budgets.
Do you have any questions?
Yeah, that was a fairly quick, fast through summary that we had. And you said the total appropriation, $712,807?
That would be what the base level funding is, so this would be an additional over that $712,000.
274
Correct,
is over the 712.
correct.
That full list is in your attachment.
Yeah,
the attachment
yeah,
you got.
it's here, and it's, yeah. Well, I'll give the committee while I think about a question too. Anybody got any questions on this? I have some questions or comments to make, but, I will, when we sit up here, we look at these things right here and we pick on what has and what is not, I think it's inappropriate to think that you're going to double your request. That's just one that I see here that's doubling from 50,000 to 100,000. I think that's probably, that's more than than what we normally do just to double something as it's coming in. That's a great deal of increase there. I don't, as far as the government agencies are concerned, there's some that we're obligated to serve. The Williams County Animal Shelter, library, maybe something else, that historically, we have always covered a part of that because they do a service for us. That in itself may not be too outrageous or too difficult to understand. But you've got new agency requests at 182,000, and provides traditional housing for those leaving bridges. That's doorstep project. Share Built provides pro bono capital project management services. Where does this, either one of, where does this benefit the city, and how does this figure in to what? How, can you wanna take a shot at it?
So any outside nonprofit that falls under the categories that you saw in slide 3, registered with the IRS as a 501c3, C4, C6, and checks all of our required boxes for, audits and notification of, their work plan and filling out the forms, anyone can apply.
Right.
And so in those individual forms and work plans, they state what they would use the monies for. In this group of new requests, the $100,000 for the African American Heritage Society is to continue work on rehabbing the Merrill Williams home. It's estimated now at a cost of $2 million to do the renovation work. Last year they made a request for $100,000. The city awarded $50. They are once again asking for $100.
They bounced between
Right.
50 and 100. We ended up at 50 with an understanding that they might circle back should they need more funding. So that's how we left that in full disclosure of where that was and how we ended up at 50 last year, knowing that there could be more. I know they've done some additional fundraising to help fill that gap as well, but this is the new request for this year. But the fact that they're back this year is not a huge surprise.
I'm not
But
surprised.
but the amount is what they choose to request and put forward. We don't weigh in on that. We just open the door.
And I solicited that because it's in my ward, and there was a lot of city code and unexpected things that went on, which it's a good thing for the structure, right? It's going to be a fine structure, and so they were going to have to go out and raise more money, and this is something where I recommended that last year, and they're looking at, and we discussed maybe multiple years, there could be something of a similar amount, and it wouldn't be forever. It's really project specific. This is not a operational need. It's not for the operations of the African American Heritage Society, just for that project. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair and members of the board, I pulled it up on their presentation. It's page number 7, where they talk about the $2 million of estimated restoration, and it lists the funding will allow them to conduct essential structural repairs, preserve historical architectural elements, develop educational programs, including oral history projects and genealogy, host cultural and community events, and provide spaces for meetings, seminars, and special programs. So it doesn't go into line item detail, but it does provide that full summary.
My comment is that it is going to be something that I believe is going to have a connection to the MTSU, and so it's going to be adding things that wouldn't, it's not just like they're fixing the house, and so I think that's probably it. I wasn't aware how much it's really going to cost, but I do know that they're raising money some other ways.
So what are you saying then, that the 100,000 does not necessarily, all of it is not for restoration purposes?
Oh, it is. Oh, it absolutely is.
Okay.
But I mean, it's going to be more than
Oh, yeah, but, well, I'm not sure where we go or where I go from here, but to have, well over $1 million in appropriations when a few years ago, not that long ago, you probably didn't have 50% of that. So, and, you know, if that's what the committee is wanting to do, you want to accept the program enhancement request, new agency request for funding and whatever, you know, I'm not gonna worry too much, or argue too much one way or the other about it. But that is a great deal that's a great deal of money to, you know, if you want to restore a house, go out. It's not the government's responsibility, I don't think, to restore this or restore that any more than it's the government's responsibility to restore any house or any organization that is a 501c3. But if we want, and I shouldn't be picking on the African American Heritage Society, because all of these down through here, they're all basically pretty much the same. They're all sister cities wants $30,000 more. Second Harvest wants $992. One Generation Away wants $4,400 to $600. Grace Works $7,200. Gentry Foundation $4,450. Franklin Tomorrow, all of those are additionals. Are we collectively in agreement that all of the appropriations that we're looking at, we want to put into the budget? Okay. Which one you
Oh,
don't?
you gonna ask me that now? You gonna make me? No, I think I said it last year, which is, I think we need I did say it. I've said it probably the last 2 or 3 years. We need a strategy. There is a role in this for government for us to do, right? Is that there are certain things that some of these nonprofits or that things they do that it's government shouldn't do those things, but we can help them achieve some of those community benefit, community needs, community services that in some cities, quite frankly, the city government does do some of these things. And we don't in Franklin in a lot of ways. And so I do think that strategically it might be why it's probably not high on the priority list, but it should be, because we have this conversation every year, seems like, which is, you know, none of these are bad.
No.
But what is our strategy? You know, we've got Second Harvest in Nashville's table. With all due respect, like I definitely don't want Franklin taxpayer dollars going to Nashville's table. I'm sure it's a great thing. I'm sure Metro Nashville government could do some of that.
I'm pretty sure those services aren't for Nashville. I think those
I'm
are
looking at
directed to
the PowerPoint
Yeah, it's
presentation.
the name, but I just want to be clear, we're not funding services outside of the community. These serve Franklin residents, just to clarify that.
The way I
Don't be
know
fooled by the title.
don't be fooled by the title. All right.
And
Well,
there's a slash there, Second
the
Harvest.
public can
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy too when it says Nashville's table, but I think that we need to look at, and I know how nonprofits work because I've worked in a lot of them. And you get some money over here from this grant, money from that grant over there, and it kind of goes into the bucket. And are we actually getting? What are we doing to guarantee that it's not going to Nashville's table? Any kind of accountability?
We have a contract with every one of these recipients.
Okay.
And there are deliverables that are defined within each of those contracts. And so that does tie back to the stated public purpose when they
Understood.
submit these. So, yeah, we do have an accountability back to every agency.
And I believe that. I really do.
Okay.
I think what we need, that was a rabbit hole. I apologize. The main point was we need a strategy. I think we need a strategy, y'all have a strategy. Don't get me wrong. But not really.
We honestly don't.
You just take it.
The
I mean,
board has struggled with this.
Yeah.
In the 16-plus years
Yeah.
I've been here.
Right.
About how to do this.
Sure.
And at one point, we even enlisted the United Way to help us with some
Right.
prioritization, and that was not satisfactory. So we've really, honestly,
Understood.
you've hit on something that is a challenge because we haven't quite gotten there with an overall philosophy. It's sort of been, see what comes in. Some of these have been here for many, many
Right, right,
years. And they all do, you're right, they all do good work. But it's also, that number continues to grow every year. And what is your comfort level about how much you're willing to do? So it's an absolutely valid point, and there isn't a clear overarching direction on this. We have sort of bring it to you, and we do the best we can to get some consensus, and then we move on year to year, quite frankly.
And from the funding perspective, generally what we have done year over year is whatever the level of expense increase overall for the operating budget is, whatever that inflationary amount is, if economics allow for it, appropriation requests go up that amount. So if the expenses go up by an average of 3 or 3.5 or 5%, that's the additional money that the existing agencies receive. We generally, what we do here, which is different than how we do the rest of our budget, is the rest of our budget is level service design. So we build that inflation in. This, somewhat as a regulator, is the base budget is level funded. You start at the same dollars each year, and then we pull it out in the program enhancements as you see on the first two slides at the end.
So circling back, Mr. Chair, circling back to what Alderman Baggett just said, I've pulled up the information there for Second Harvest. It says the food rescue due to the City of Franklin's investment will be invested directly back into the Franklin community, as we will make the rescued grocery products available to our 8 partner agencies in Williamson County. So does it stay all in Franklin? Maybe not, but is it sourced and started here? The answer is yes.
And I bet one of their 8 partners, or at least 2 of them, are Graceworks and One Gen Away, which we're also giving to. Again, they do work together, but again, we need a food strat. Okay, well, city of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen decide, hey, we believe that we need to appropriate funds for food insecurity in our city. How are we going to best efficiently do that? And that might be one. But, you know, the idea that somebody comes up, you know, another food bank comes to us, and here we are again, right? And so we need a bit of a strategy. I would say, last comment, and then but Franklin Tomorrow is another great example of an appropriation in my mind. They provide us 12 opportunities throughout the year in the Frank Talks. They give us 4 community events, the Breakfast with the Mayors. They do all, and whenever the mayor calls to do a special project, or staff calls, they're doing something that the city would do it otherwise. We would have communications or someone on staff do that, but we're able to do that through an appropriation. Those are the kind of synergies we need to find across the board, in my opinion, and put a plan together.
Mr. Chair, I do have a question. And this one is on when we're looking at slide 8 with ShareBuilt, which is a new organization for me when I read up on it, and I've got it pulled up. But with ShareBuilt, it says the funds will support ongoing future operations for managing capital projects in Franklin, including $15,000 in public relations for projects and nonprofit partners, $2,500 in travel reimbursements for volunteer project managers, $30,000 in operations costs for ShareBuilt to oversee the project and maintain relationships among shepherds. Design and construction industry professionals, design. It continues on. The nonprofits themselves, $2,500 in technical assistance. I mean, it's detailed out, but I guess I had a larger question as I'm looking at this new one. Aside from it coming before this board, do we have another review panel that sits down to look at the new applicants, or this is truly the first time that the city is seeing it right here, and this goes back
You're
to what
part
you're...
of it.
This goes back to what you were
We share it
saying.
with you. Yeah, like I said, we've looked at that in the past,
Okay.
and that's had mixed results. So we ended up back to this process within the board, and really using this committee as the initial sounding board and giving us at least some form of guidance, and then we implement it from there, so.
They need to align with our strategic plan too. I think that's what we need. That as we finish up, I think that's really the buckets.
That's a great.
When we
way to
get the
look at it.
strategic plan, we need to then categorize these within the strategic plan buckets. And I think, you know, economic development's one, you know, quality of life, and that would help, I think, me say, all right, well, where does Studio 10 fall into this? Where does it fall into our strategic plan? And then we can determine from that standpoint. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
would we might not be able to hear, since there are a few new ones, I think we're all familiar with African American Heritage
Yeah.
Society and the challenges. I'm familiar with Doorstep Project and have been a supporter of them, and it fulfills an important function in our community as next step housing for domestic violence victims. If they're here, I'd love to hear just a brief comment. And also ShareBuild, that's a totally new one to me that I'm not familiar with. So, and I do know ShareBuild's here and is prepared to make a comment. So,
I think that's what that's what I'd like to hear, if there's somebody here representing any of these organizations. If you'd like to say something, if someone is here for ShareBuilt, as the mayor has asked, come forward there.
And as he approaches the podium, I think, Mr. Chair, this is part of that process that I think we probably do need to have in place when there's a new applicant or that comes forward, like a ShareBuilt or other, that allows them a few minutes of podium time so we can better understand that, just like we do for any of our departments when they're presenting their budget requests.
Thank you. I'm Steve Kuhn.
Okay,
I'm the founder and executive director of ShareBuilt.
okay,
And so we are actually celebrating our 3rd anniversary this month. And we are a truly unique nonprofit in that we exist solely to serve other nonprofits at no cost to them. And we serve them in the area of helping them navigate the complex process of planning and executing their construction projects. Most nonprofit executive directors, even if they've done a project before, they have no margin in their life to handle a project. And so we help them navigate that process through introducing them to the proper design and construction consultants so that they can get the right help at the right time to plan and execute that project. And then because we serve them at no cost through volunteers that we call Project Shepherds, they are really owners' representatives that they don't have to pay for. And these are career construction and design professionals who have spent 20, 30, 40 years in the business and are volunteering their time to guide these nonprofits through this process. And then what we do is we really are we jokingly say we're a dating service. So we're going to help that nonprofit find a date, meaning, who do they need to talk to navigate that process? Okay? And so a big part of that is being a voice for them, and that's where the marketing comes in. You mentioned, the comment about the marketing. We're helping them tell their story in a language they don't know to an audience they don't know but desperately need to make that project successful. And so we help them promote that project, attract additional trade contractors and design firms to that project so that more participation leads to a project performed at less cost. So as we like to say, the more involved, more gets done for less. And so really at our core mission is we are helping them keep their hard-earned revenue for their nonprofit in their core mission. And the folks that support every one of these nonprofits that we serve certainly expect that, and not to have these nonprofits sort of chasing their tail trying to figure out how do you do design and construction. So that's really at the core what we do. We have 19 current projects and clients, which in 3 years is pretty amazing. And we're a very efficient organization, and it's been very rewarding to see the need for this, which was my theory before we started it, be validated by so much interest from the nonprofit community. And before I started it, I realized I did not want to reinvent a wheel. And I spent 2 months searching nationwide, could not find one organization in the entire country doing this. So the need's immense. The resources in the community, I think, are as great or greater than the need. So thank you for the opportunity. One comment I would make, just hearing your conversation before, you might consider engaging the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee. They aggregate, a lot of gifts and distribute them, and they may be able to provide some great guidance going forward to this committee for maybe how to approach these kind of things in the future. Glad to answer any questions you have.
Alderman Peterson.
Could you give an example of something that you've done in Middle Tennessee?
Yes, ma'am. I was the personal project
Franklin
shepherd
would be good to know.
for the Refuge Center for Counseling. So, that they had already broken ground on their project when they realized, and this is after 6 years of designing, budgeting, redesigning, budgeting, they had broken ground, but they did not have anybody who was providing their owner's rep services, and they didn't even have that in their budget. So they were out interviewing firms to do that, and to have to pay them to do that with money they didn't have in their budget, and we got introduced, and I personally served as the project shepherd on that project, which of course the grand opening is, they've been open for a while, but the grand opening public is April 26th. So. And then Ellie's house, also, I'm not sure if it's technically Franklin, but it's on Sneed Road. We're serving them locally. We had worked with the American Legion Post 215 a little bit, advised them as they were getting ready to do their project, which they're in the middle of right now. Just some local examples.
Thank you.
So what kind of advice did you give to Post 215?
Well, we had worked with them. What we told them, and one of the big things that we do is we want to be a voice for that nonprofit and promote the project and try to attract bidders to it and really help them attract, the community to support that project. So we suggested to them, they didn't take us up on it, but host like a breakfast to raise awareness of the project with the trade community, suppliers, et cetera, so that we make them aware of the need well in advance of when it typically happens, when it's just kind of bid time and somebody has a week to respond to a bid. So that would be an example of what and we actually did it with Refuge Center as well, even though they had already broken ground. So.
Okay. Well, since I was on this end for about 11 years, 10 years ago, I'm somewhat familiar with filling out the paperwork and the steps you have to go through. I'll be honest with you, I can't imagine that was never that complicated at that particular time. Was never difficult. It was time consuming, but it wasn't difficult to fill out the paperwork, to make a request through the city for appropriations and to be put on the appropriations list. But I guess I'm assuming that you are telling the committee and us that you are a in-between person that's gone to the nonprofits, they're needing help, so you're guiding them through the steps that they need to go through to put in an application to
No.
come and make a
No,
request
sir.
here at the city.
No, sir. We help them with their process, with how do they find a design firm? How do they find a contractor? How do they tell the community about the need and the value of their mission and their project and what it's going to do to help the community? So we help them do that as a advisor and a guide at no cost to them, and help them navigate the messy, complex process of planning and building their building, when most of them have never done that before. And so and they can never start early enough. A lot of them might take free land thinking that this is a great benefit, and it's probably the worst thing they could do because you might not even be able to build on it or build what you want. So advising them in those ways, as I jokingly tell them, it's much more fun to keep you out of a ditch than get you out of one. And unfortunately, a lot of them, make decisions early because they just don't know any better. And so we're there to help them kind of avoid those pitfalls.
Chair?
Yes.
Might say, if to disclose, that I do go to church with you, and Sharebuilt is a customer, but I didn't actually suggest that you do this, or we didn't talk at length about this. But what I think there is, and I will recuse myself from voting on this, just because, but nonprofits, and I've been one of them, I've worked with them. African American Heritage Society is a good example of one, where a nonprofit gets an idea to do something, doesn't know where to start and what to do. And I think there could be a partnership or some sort of may not be through a funding request. But our Building and Neighborhood Services team, when they get, I guarantee you, they get tens of calls a year from nonprofits who want to start, and I'm sure people in the back, they want to do a little renovation. Who do I need to talk? And the staff is providing a lot of that guidance. I do think there is definitely a city partnership of not formal or any, but with our building and neighborhood services, where when they see a nonprofit coming in that has some issues that needs guidance, they can, develop that relationship with them. But like I said, I don't know that it's appropriation or not. That would be for everyone to decide. But I do think that would be the city benefit to staff, which is staff we don't have the capacity to guide every nonprofit on every single step of the way. And I think that some sort of formal or informal coordination, when that happens, that is a benefit for the city. Whether that's this appropriation as it's written, or whether that's something else in the future. I do think it is, like I said, could be a strategic interest, but may or may not be based on as it's written.
Yeah. There was one more Franklin-based one I didn't mention, was Path United. We have worked with them in the past as they were trying to set up a resource center for the kids in the trailer park off of West Main. So, talk with them. Any other questions?
I'm looking, what is your total budget?
Our total budget for this year is $200,000. And we've received grants from the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee on a couple of occasions, and then a lot of private support and corporate support from the business community.
Any other questions? Alderman Potts, Alderman Peterson. Mayor, are you?
I'm satisfied to understand better what ShareBuild is, and certainly they're making a great contribution to some of the nonprofits in our community, and I specifically appreciated mentioning the projects here in Franklin. So I think Alderman Baggett's point is, how can we aggregate these more into our strategic plan and categorize them and so on? Because, I'm just looking at, in 2022, we were doing 509,000 base budget, and now we're up to 712 base budget.
And another 274 onto that.
Yeah, so.
282, whatever it was.
But, for example, I don't know if Doorstep Project is here. Are they here? But, they're a service that I think if that wasn't in our community, some of those people are going to go back into the situation they came out of. The housing is so important. So, but it's a difficult decision. I mean, we have limited funds as far as what we can fund as far as program enhancements for nonprofits.
Have we've actually used a percentage of increase. Did we tie that to the inflationary increase, or what did we tie?
We've looked at just our general overall and kind of inflationary as a base. We have not always done it. And when we reduced things in the wake of COVID, the outside agencies took a similar cut to what happened to our departments across the board as well. So I think some of what you saw in 22 was some restoration, but you've had some things added, and you've had some significant chunks of things that have been maybe more one-time, cycle through. But yeah, that we've tried to look at it and do it in as equitable a manner as we could compared to what we did for general operations.
Mr. Chair, just a quick question while Ms. Kuhn's still at the podium. If I understood you, your annual budget this year is $200,000?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and the request is for $50,000?
From the city, yes.
Okay, 25%, okay. How does that fare for other nonprofits? It seems large at 25% of their budget for annual. Do we have any information on that?
We'd have to look, but most of these were a smaller percentage of operating budgets.
Okay.
I mean, yeah.
And if I could address that briefly, what I've learned and found as you start a nonprofit is getting to the 3-year point is a huge step. And to qualify for funding from some large foundations like ACA Foundation, which we've initiated conversations with, the Frist Foundation, et cetera, you have to have 3 years under your belt to even have that conversation. So you know, the percentage, although it seems large for us, we're a very lean and really just coming out of the startup phase of an organization. I could tell you if we would get approved and we go forward, I mean, I would never see that, any expectation that percentage stays the same by any means. You know, this is as you start a nonprofit, getting that funding to help you get going is the biggest challenge. And so, but again, having 3 years under our belt and 19 clients that we've served hopefully demonstrates the impact that we're having on the community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do think that would be possibly something important for us to put on our form, and if it's there right now, Michael or Eric, if you guys could correct us.
We have their budgets. I mean, we
Right,
can
well, I was
easily give you
just,
that.
yeah, and I've been pulling them up and looking. I was looking at the percent of their request against their budget. It's quick, it's easy.
We have that information. We could provide that to you.
Okay.
Any additional questions?
I don't
Thank
have
thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I will request that if we've got any other, as Mayor Moore just asked a moment ago, if there's any other representatives from Doorstep or African American Heritage Society or Studio 10, since these are new requests, if they wanted to take the podium and have similar mic time. And if you could identify yourself, that'd be great.
Hi, my name is Rachel Jones. I'm the Development Director with Studio 10 Theater Company. Thank you for this discussion. I am relatively new to my role, so it's also very helpful to see who else is asking for support and their and what they're asking for. That helps us as a marker to know what we should be asking for in the future. I have this listed in the application, but I feel this might be most important. But first, let me tell you what Studio 10 is. We are a nonprofit professional theater company. We are the only professional theater company in Williamson County. We are right here in the factory at Franklin, so we support everyone who is here. We have over 390 contracted people that we employ throughout our season that falls between October and May. We are new to the Turner Theater, but not new to that space. It's our second year there. But we've been around for 15 years, and we have 5 big productions a year, as well as educational opportunities for children, for adults, and for those who are interested in the performing arts going into college or as their profession. We also have collaborations with other nonprofits where we help with sensory-friendly performances, ASL performances, and then economically accessible performances. But I feel what might be most important for me to share is that we have a American for the Arts Economic Prosperity Calculator, and on average, a Studio 10 production, which once again, we have 5 of those every year, generates $58,886 in expenditures by audiences, 5 full-time jobs in the community right here, $108,000 roughly in household income via wages, and over $15,000 in local and state government revenue. So that's directly from the support that we have by creating an economy ourselves within Studio 10 and also bolstering the economy that we have here in the city. I'm happy to answer more questions, but I felt that might be most appropriate.
Did you know your annual budget?
I know that what we have listed for this past year was 2.2 million, 2.27. So this percentage of 20,000 is a smaller percentage. And on average, it costs $300,000 to put on a production. So we do 5 of those a year.
Any questions from the board?
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I don't have any more. Anyone else wish to tell us about what their organization is or does? And if not, where does the board want to go from here?
I had one more question on the Transit Alliance of Middle Tennessee. I think the mayor's on that board. It was 25% of their budget, their request. I mean, there's neither here nor there, but, yeah, and I think they're, again, and I understand that the greater good here is transit education for the program, for the Middle Tennessee Transit, I guess kind of like Transit Leadership Institute or something like that is what it's called. Again, I think, this is where I'll end it, because we can go through each one of these and ask all these kinds of probing questions,
Yep.
but maybe we have a month or so later in the year that we don't have budget and finance. I think we schedule one of those months and take all these kinds of thoughts and maybe begin to formulate in one meeting where there's not an agenda. I know that's another meeting for us, but in our regular schedule of meetings, there's just not a lot of time. But we do have a couple of months where we don't. And formulate this. So next year, these people can come in, know exactly what we're looking for, and have a framework that we can flesh out, and not in the middle of the budget process where we know we got to move, right?
But one of the takeaways from this conversation is that as we finish work on the strategic plan, what I'm hearing is that the design of a rubric that allocates the 6 goals and how each of these would fit into each of them. The amount of money that's available every year will always be less than the amount that is requested. That's true about budgeting 101. But I think that could give some assistance and guidance, as well as developing, through that rubric, some additional guidance before it gets to you at this stage. But to Eric's point, fundamentally, you are the ultimate decision makers. And any guidance that you can give us as in that vein to design that rubric would certainly be greatly welcomed by your staff.
But I do think Alderman Potts has hit on something where I can tell you that many years ago, there was a group that worked on the appropriations being no more than a certain percentage of the total budget of a nonprofit. And I know that percentages went down. I don't remember exactly what the number was, but there was a number. And I think the example is a $2.2 million budget versus a $20,000 appropriation. And I'm not going to I'll pick on you if you don't mind. 50,000 against 200,000, which is 25%. Is that not correct, mathematician? Is that, you think that? Okay. So I think that we probably, that's one of the things I think needs to be filled into this. There is one other thing that we, in the past, maybe not from this committee, do any of you go to United Way? Do you request? They have a pretty stringent procedure, or they did anyway, to make a request on this. And a lot of times we would use the United Way request to kind of judge whether or not it was an appropriate request from the city of Franklin. But, I know that, look, I know I went to United Way. And I went to United Way a dozen times, 12 years that I was with the J.L. Clay Senior Citizen Center, did the same thing here. Came to the city and did the request for the city. Made the same paperwork out in the same request for the county. So I know I went to all 3 of those organizations, city, county, and United Way, for the request that funded the J.L. Clay Senior Citizen Center. We didn't, there was no intermediary, in other words. So I would like to see us at least maybe have some guidelines. You could look at United Way and see what their guidelines are for this. But if this is the first time request, it basically isn't a guideline. It's just kind of throw a number up and see if it sticks. If it doesn't stick, we'll go something less. or something more if you're lucky and it falls up instead of down, which doesn't usually happen. But I do like your suggestion. I think that I think that this is even maybe larger than just the request itself. If we're expected to grow from 712,000 up to 1,000,000, 2 million, whatever it was the total number of, was the total amount of requests for appropriations. If we're expected to go up that much every year, I think we've got I don't list it as an issue, but I think that it's probably something that we do need to take a look at.
It is a large increase.
Yes, it
And
is.
larger than probably any other categorical increase if you look at like departments
Exactly.
that is in this budget or is in any budget request. So I mean, I think you're right on target that that's a policy issue and guidance we need. It's awkward because there is no guidance, specifically for us to say yes or no, or here might be a limiting factor, or where to draw the line. And so I always try to gather from what I hear from you all and make the best judgment I can about where I think you all are, and then submit it to you in the recommended budget. But I think you're right. A broader framework would be very helpful. And we've never really been able to fully get there. Honestly, we've tried some things, but we're not to where we have something we can really rely on, or really even good guidance to the folks that come to us. They're all doing great work. It's never a judgment about that. It's just about where we put our resources versus the other things that are our direct responsibility in serving the community.
And we need to let them know now, so this might be that notification, because of, again, being involved in nonprofits, you got to plan ahead in your
Yeah.
budget. And so if we are making these kinds of changes, and that could risk, some people may not get the same amount, or if we're changing up the rubric, that means everything has to be on the table. It's best to let them know a year in advance so they can plan for it than it is to spring it on them right before they're about to, they submit the grant application, and the goalpost is moved. So I'd like to send out a formal note, if we, maybe we let them know even now that they're going to be reviewed, this is going to be reviewed, and we'll do it in the summer or whenever we're going to do it. And then that way they can be planning on that.
So as part of the budget and performance website on the city's, page on the city's website, there is a separate page for appropriations to outside agencies. So that goes through the bullet points of what is required for submission. Once that rubric is made, would be my suggestion. Because right now, it is still, this is a very good idea for us to go and develop and work with you all to solidify. But then we would certainly put that out there as well. Generally, the timeline for this has been that materials are open for submission and available, and we send them out on February 1st or so, and we get them back on March 1st. And then you come to this meeting, so if there's enough time for us to do all the double checks and make sure that they have submitted all their state forms, IRS forms, audits, et cetera, to then come before you.
So if we got that rubric out in August or September,
Correct.
That would fit in that.
That
Yeah,
would
be
absolutely
good
fit
timing.
in the time.
and then they can adjust their requests to meet
Correct.
the specific needs. And no one wants to, everybody's doing good stuff. But my main comment was to give them plenty of lead time to be able to budget appropriately. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'll just chime in as well. I think that I do like the idea of having an additional meeting. I feel like when we look at the new request, we look at the inflationary request, and this particular committee deals with a lot of figures on a regular basis, but I think today was just a red flag of new requests and really needing to validate those, because we know all of these organizations in their own special way are doing great work. They're contributing to Franklin in their own way. And the thing that we're responsible for doing is being good stewards of the city's money and making sure that we're following that process. I do love the idea of having a rubric so that we know that. I like the fact that previously there was a percentage of the organization's total budget. I think that for me is definitely a flag that gets raised in my head. So I think that that's necessary. I like the timeline Alderman Baggett's referencing right there. I think I'd come back and ask Eric or ask Michael, as we look at slides 7 and 8 on the program enhancements requests, which are primarily inflationary, and then the new enhancements, the decision for those has to be made within committee today, or what is the recommendation
Typically,
there?
what we've done is had a discussion, and I factored into what I recommend in the budget. We have not formally had you all vote up or down on certain
Okay.
things. We get some guidance. It helps me with some, some thoughts in terms of what I recommend to you. And then I factored in and we try to draw it out so you can see exactly what we did. And then you can let us know if we got it right, or if you want to change anything that's been put forward in the recommendation. So that's typically what we do. And I think if there are certain thoughts one way or another, that's great. You can share those with us and we'll factor that into the recommendation. But I think a more formal process and being more intentional is a great move forward, and that would help us a lot.
Okay, good. Are there additional details that you need today from the board? Can we go ahead?
Any feedback you want to provide in the list that you've seen? I've heard a general concern that would make me say, I think we want to look at where we are, and that this collective number might be around where we need to stay for the time being, in terms of budget to budget. I know there may be some exceptions with some things that are, in process, like the African American Heritage Society project. Those kind of that's one thing that stands out to me. But I would think you need to give us some guidance before we do a whole lot new. That would be my takeaway and my read of this discussion overall, and the concern about the overall number.
Yeah, I'll give one specific, which is for doorstep project. As Mayor Moore referenced, I think that those funds, without those funds, that you have an individual who's in a very difficult situation, and without that funding, they could be put right back into that challenging situation. And I know that there are some other nonprofits out there, but I think that Doorstep is doing a great job on that right now.
Well, let me say, there's some things here that tell about on increases, and most of the increases were inflationary. But then they named the ones, that would not be, and including, like the Doorstep was providing transitional housing for those leaving Bridges. But what I'm saying is that, 3/4 of them were just inflationary. So, but there were 2 new requests, and we talked about two of them, here.
So have we decided to
Three
add one
new
additional
requests.
meeting at some point in time between now and when you present the
Well,
budget?
what I took is that you maybe want us to do something that maybe holds the line-ish for this next budget cycle, and that we have something that's more developed that can speak into the FY27 budget, that we would develop post-budget, but before we open up the process in the fall, later in the fall of this year. That's kind of what I gathered, because I think it's hard to
that's it.
come up with a really developed framework guide in the next month. Because
Okay.
I've got to recommend a budget to you in less than a month.
Okay.
So I think there's some guidance.
Pressure's on you?
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking through how we realistically do that.
do it.
Yeah.
The other qualification I would make on this slide 7, I guess, that had the inflationary, there's a pretty wide variety of how people are defining inflationary. I would suggest we use one standard and apply it
Yep.
to the group, because you see their inflationary version is 10%, and others are 3%. So let's come up with what we think is fair, maybe something that matches some of our overall budget guidelines, and apply that to existing funders, and then look at these ones that are outside of the base, and take any other guidance you have there, and we'll look at that, and anything I put in a recommendation will clearly be highlighted for you to give feedback on, and when you vote, make sure you're clear on it.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I do have, and I apologize, Eric, I know that was a quick summary. We do need to move forward. As we were on the other slide for new enhancements, I know at the bottom we've got sister cities here, and they've got
Yeah.
inflationary and some other things, but I believe Kim is in the audience, if you're all right, Mr. Chair, she could come to the table and provide a little bit of detail on what that request is.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. That's,
Kim, not to put you on the spot, we just want to, since we have the opportunity.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for taking this under consideration. We are adding an additional sister city in Spain, so that's going to take a lot of work. And our board came to this number, trying to figure out what some of our new programs would be. And they said if we want to make it happen and we want to do it well, we are going to need some additional funding and a person to do what you do. So the Spain, we're doing the Chris Kindle Market. We're also looking at a youth soccer exchange with Ireland. So that's going to take some coordination and some skills that we don't have on our board if we choose to go with that. And so people from Ireland would be coming here. So that supports our mission statement of economic growth and tourism and visiting, bringing visitors. Maybe you should just ask me, does anyone have a question that it might be better if you specific to that, or? The good speakers are all at work today, so sorry. I'm the,
No, I
I'm the
think
one
that
with the
was,
heart. They're the money people and the good speakers, but please
And
ask me any
this is-
question.
This is 50, this would be 50% of your budget.
Yes, or, and today I was out looking for grants because we're also having an exhibit going to Bad Soden, Germany and we're working with Visit Franklin, Maureen Franklin tomorrow on that exhibit, which will be in 2026. And that exhibit will also travel to our new sister city, Ciudad Rodrigo, Spain. So we're trying to get a lot of mileage out of that. So we want to make sure we present Franklin and Williamson County very well. And after that, to Ireland and then Canada, and then traveling with the pumpkin.
any other questions or
I
comments?
just have a
Thank you.
question on the additional sister city. Where are we in that process? Is that decided? Is that, I mean, because the board hasn't engaged in that discussion at
Right.
all. So
We're
what's the expectation?
We need to bring that to
Okay.
you. My husband and I are traveling on our own to Ciudad Rodrigo in May with the BGA teacher who's bringing 30 of the Franklin Williamson County students there. Their board is very excited to be a sister city, and they have already approved it, and it's moving forward. But we are trying to do the process step by step in order, and they have a lot of enthusiasm in Spain for being our sister city. So we will be bringing that to the board. That just takes someone's time and energy. We got to
Sure.
write some formal things up for you.
okay.
Thank you for your time. Thanks.
If I could just comment very quickly, we're getting a lot of bang for the buck from sister cities. Kim has done a great job in the programming that they're doing, and the exchanges that are happening are pennies on the dollar for what they're doing.
Well, I think we've given Eric enough guidance and enough understanding. And I do want to say that it's difficult for any of us sitting up here because, again, we say the same thing each year. All of the organizations are certainly worthwhile organizations. There does come a time when we have to seriously look at what we're doing as far as appropriations are concerned relative to the rest of the budget. And I think this is an opportunity to do that. And if I hope that hope that no one takes this, I've said or what anyone else has said personally, but it is a difficult situation. We've got a $200 million budget, and we've spent an hour on $200 and something thousand. What percentage is that? Math? A very small percentage, yes. So, thank you for your attendance. Let's go, if there are no other questions or comments, let's go to item 4 then, which is budget presentation miscellaneous general budget funds.
We'll make this item brief to get to the next one. There are 2 final budgets that you have not reviewed this year. You will do so in about the next 3 minutes. Those are general expenses and interfund transfers, both within the general fund. The general expense department of the city's general fund includes all expenditures which, quite honestly, are not attributable to any one department otherwise. These expenses include the allocation, the largest, the allocation of general wage increases and merit pay. It serves as the pass-through account for the city's medical and dental appropriations, the city's dues in the Tennessee Municipal League. Annual audit costs are budgeted here. Fuel hedging is budgeted here, as well as the Franklin Community Survey, which, shameless plug for that, is out. It's been 3,000 cards were sent on March 17th to selected Franklin residents, randomly selected Franklin residents. The all-comers survey will be open and available Monday, April 14th, for 2 weeks. So we will have that available. You'll see in the front banner of the city's website that you can get to that page, and we'll have that link ready to go first thing on Monday morning. Finally, there is $100,000 set aside for the supportive housing initiatives, which was first added in the 2019 budget and remains forecast and proposed for fiscal 26. There are 2 categories to examine. One is personnel and one is, yes, sir?
100,000 for supporting housing projects. How do we spend it this year?
Generally, we have not spent all of those funds in any given year. The board at the time believed and wanted to have some small amount of money for support of housing, and it's labeled that way intentionally, initiatives, depending upon what may come up as potential seed money or study money or what have you.
Okay, thank you.
If I might give just a bit of history, this was a request by Alderman Pearl Bransford when she was in office, and knowing Pearl, if you did, she asked for a lot more than that.
There was at least another zero involved.
There was.
I was just curious if we spent it. I've never heard that over the last few years, so thank you.
The personnel budget is currently $2.19 million. The proposed budget for 26 is $4.1 million, or an increase of $1,956,238, or 89.3%. This is always a misleading number because as the annual wage increases are moved out of this budget, the personnel number goes down and is in other budgets. So this $4.1 million figure is a total of 2 main items. Number one, our standard set aside for cost of living adjustments and merit increases, as well as an amount for the results of the market compensation study, which is being concluded by the city currently. So there are several amounts of regular wages which are built into this. In your first budget amendment of every year, we redistribute those funds to the departments based upon what the actual merit increases are. But that allows the departmental budgets to be built apples to apples. This is the one that looks a little higher than, it's not apples to apples, if you will. In operations, the current budget is $429,534. The fiscal 26 proposal is $2,016,893. This is an increase of $1.587 million, or 369.6%. Now, before we get sticker shock, if you remember the last several months, department after department has come in front of you and said, look, our operations are decreasing. Well, there was a reason for that. We have made the intentional effort to transfer all property and liability insurance costs for the city in the general fund to general expenses. It will be much easier to manage. It will be much easier to do the invoicing because every year we bid out that package in such a way that it maximizes the insurance as well as it lowers the cost to what we can. What that results in is wild differences within departments year over year over year. And at the end of the day, your property and liability insurance is your property and liability insurance, whether or not it happened in the police department or hopefully not the budget and performance office. So that amount is 1.5 million of this 1.587. We've also moved all telephone, desk phone costs, which are about $36,000 a year, as well as internet, which is around $150,000 a year in the general fund to general expenses. Again, it means we don't have to do the manual labor of breaking it out by department just to fill out and say, yes, my desk phone, I did use it this many times in a given year. There were decreases. Number one, the discontinuation of one of our websites, which is about $29,000, as well as the 25 budget included money for special census efforts, and we are not going to be repeating that in fiscal 26. Interfund transfers, the final budget. Interfund transfers are simply that. It's money that goes from the general fund to other departments. There are 4 of these appropriations or transfers that occur regularly. Number 1 is $500,000 to the Street Aid and Transportation Fund. That's split half $250 for sidewalk gaps, as developed 10 years ago under the Invest Franklin initiative, and $250,000 to support asset management and paving of city facilities. If you recall, a couple of years ago, we did an evaluation of our sidewalks, our trails, our parking lots, and we need to catch up on those. And this is money set aside and runs through streets so that they can maximize the paving contract to do that work. The second is the general fund appropriation to the transit fund. This is an increase of over $400,000 in fiscal 26. To $1.461 million. It's about a little north of $1 million this year. If you recall the Transit Authority's presentation, the large reason for that is because the limited federal grants that came under ARPA and COVID the CARES Act monies have been used. And so this is the amount of money that they are requesting to maintain their operations for fiscal 26. The third transfer is for the Fleet Replacement Fund. We created this about 3 years ago, and all commercial fleet vehicles within the general fund are funded through this separate fund. The amount of transfer is $3.467 million in fiscal 26. I will tell you that as we go through the budget balancing process, that number will go down. Because as we look, we're working with Fleet to do the evaluation of just how many vehicles do we really get in during a year, and can we? And there's an existing fund balance of over several $1 million in that fund. So we won't need to transfer that full amount, but if you look at the total program asked for the year, if we did get them all in, it would be that amount. And finally is the annual transfer to the Capital Projects Fund. So this is going down, excuse me, almost made it, from about $5.6 million to $3.5 million. 1.6 is for approved CIP project support. The other is $1.9 million for the Liberty Hills Stream Restoration Project. There's over $1.1 million in grant funds that support that is in the revenue model. The balance is general fund support. That number is down this year overall by about $3 million because instead of putting cash into the Capital Projects Fund, it is now being used to service the fiscal 25 general obligation bonds. So as we issue new bonds, we support them with property tax. The property tax that we had been collecting, we'd been storing up cash. Now, a good portion of that is no longer a part of this transfer, but rather would be reflected in the debt service fund. Happy to stand for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions of the committee? Mayor, any questions? If none, let's go to item 5, which is discussion of fiscal year 2026 budget enhancements and priorities.
So Eric and I will probably tag team this one. What I'll do is kind of walk you through your packet and walk you through the process. And then the final slide is sort of what's left to do in the budget. So at your places, you have the printout, and on your civic clerk agenda item, we asked all of you to review the program enhancement requests as submitted by departments. There were over 100 different requests which were made that total over $12.4 million between the 4 operational funds. And your packet is set up in 4 sheets, as I have labeled them. The first is the individual summaries for all of you who submitted your top 15 rankings, so those top 15 requests. The second sheet is a single count ranking, so literally how many of you chose one item, and that is one vote, one person, one vote, a way to evaluate that. No bias in terms of if it was your top or your bottom. The third, there are 44 individual PERs of the, I think, 107 that board members voted for. The third sheet is the average ranking. So that takes the relative rank 1 through 15 of each enhancement listed by members in your respective top 15 lists. And then sheets 4 and 5 try to actually give a weight, because the count, how many times it's counted on or voted on by you should count for something, and how high your priority is should count for something. So that summarizes in sheet 5. And what we tried to do was to take a modified weighted rank where you divide the average rank, sheet 3, by the frequency to give you a weighted rank in sheet 4. And that works, except if you see in sheet 4, in the top 15, there is one item which only one of you voted for. And so that kind of skews that item higher compared to the relative weight of others. So on the example on the screen, you can see that one board member voted for the outfitting of the mobile drone response vehicle and fire, but 5 of you selected to replace a street sweeper. So what we tried to do to balance that out, as you see on the next to final slide here and on sheet 5, is to create a modified weighted ranking, where the number of times an item is selected is important, as well as the average rank. So on the screen, by ordering it this way, 14 of the top 15, at least 4 of you voted for. And so it reorders it by sheet 2 or column A first, and then the average amount, sheet 3 or column B. Your top 15 items total $4.25 million. And the green line, the top 14, is just under $4 million. And that is inclusive of all those priorities that received at least 4 votes. Top vote getter for 7 of you was to add 3-shift firefighter personnel. And then 6 votes apiece for the downtown parking study, the vehicle barrier system, and adding a materials handler in sanitation environmental services. With that, Mr. Stuckey.
So kind of step back to the bigger picture on this. What you all have told us was helpful to you is to be able to step back and think about how all these many requests that you've heard over the last 3+ months fit into what you see as priorities for the community. This is the 3rd year we've done that. The previous 2 years, we've been pretty successful at funding most of the top group here. There's pretty good alignment, and there's capacity to do it. I will offer a little word of caution for this year's budget. We have some big things on the table that are taking our attention and requiring action, and will eat up a good chunk of our capacity. So we may not be able to get as deep on this list or any list as we have in other years. And I'm talking specifically about the compensation plan update that always eats up a significant amount of capacity as we update and improve our position in the market. You know, it's been 3 years since we've done a comprehensive review. We did a significant effort last year for police and fire, but we have the rest of the organization, and there's still competitive pressures, especially in police, in terms of where we need to be with pay. So those are going to be factored in, and those are going to eat up a significant capacity, but I would say those are high priorities in terms of taking care of our people and making sure we're staying highly competitive and attracting and retaining the best talent to serve the citizens of Franklin. So that's a big piece. We talked a little bit on Tuesday night about the capital investment program, but specifically the partnership opportunity that we have in working with the Tennessee Department of Transportation. We have gotten at least partial good news that there is funding in the first round, what I'm calling, my words, first round of their 10-year plan, which is their base funding, does include a component of partnership funding for the expansion of Mac Hatcher Southeast. We were one of only 14 partnership projects to be selected across the entire state. So we know that the governor's $1 billion recommendation in his budget is still on the table. When that happens, that may open up possibilities for either additional funding in Southeast and or we had offered the same partnership opportunity for the expansion of Mac Hatcher Northwest. So we've got to be ready to respond and meet those opportunities if they come our way. So that's what we've got to prioritize, and those are big chunks in terms of a budget commitment and a funding commitment. So just know that that makes this year's budget a little bit different, and our ability to get deep on this list may be affected by that. We are going to look at where we stand and what our opportunities are. It is a reappraisal year. You heard from Brad Coleman last time. That will also be factored in about where we need to be to support these priorities. So that's just my word of overall kind of perspective and what the broader priorities are that may not land on this list but are really important and will really impact our budget overall. So I'll leave it there and glad to answer any questions, but process kind of what you've given us at this stage too.
Alderman Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you to everybody that was involved in putting together the details that, Michael, you just shared, and even taking that weight on the previous slide into consideration as we were doing that. I think that you all have done a great job on that. I know this has been challenging to pull it all together, but I thought it was great last year, and I think that it's been improved this year. So, you know, hats off to everybody involved. Eric, I appreciate what you were just saying a moment ago. I'm excited about the TDOT opportunities and respect and understand what you're saying. For public consumption, we're probably in a waiting game right now until, we'll say, the July, August timeframe. And if it's any time before that, then great. But that's our anticipated timeline regarding that
I think
budget,
you'll have
right?
decisions from TDOT in June, but we may need to act further relative to what that brings us in July. So I think your time frame generally is right in terms of resolving all of it. At least we've been told that some funding plans would come to us from TDOT approved in the late May, June timeframe. So, but that all depends on when the legislature does their work to finalize budgets, et cetera, and that is starting to move now. And so it's kind of stay tuned. We're in a waiting game is a good way to say it.
Yeah, and with that, I think that, you know, thanks needs to be said to extended to you and to Mayor Moore and to those from the engineering and planning departments that were part of those conversations to get us where we are. As you said, one of 14 in the state now to be considered for the 10-year plan. And hopefully we'll have better news in June or July. So, thank you.
I guess I can say that those two TDOT projects have been for, some of them for decades needed, you know, but I do believe that our offering to put some money, a good bit of money in, has made a difference, and I certainly hope so. But, you know, some of those things have been on their priority list for at least 10 years, and we were maybe on one, maybe even 10 years ago, and then they took us off.
We did get back on it. But I think the difference in what we're looking at is prior 10-year plans, prior to the Transportation Modernization Act, we didn't know when those projects would be completed. They were just on the 10-year plan. Now we know that if you're on the 10-year plan, those projects are going to be funded all the way through. That's the goal of TDOT. So It's not a moving target like it used to be. But there are a lot of projects that need to be done that still aren't on it.
And fewer projects are listed, but the commitment for full funding is much more solid, complete than they have been in the past, I guess is the best way to say it. So it's great if you're on the list. Yes. Wow, didn't quite think of it in that terms.
Any other questions or comments, Walter?
Just the final slide and the road ahead. Today had you saw the summary list of enhancements, starting as soon as you adjourn, we will begin the process of building the city administrator's recommendation to you all. We again schedule one-on-ones with Eric and you all to review that recommendation in late April, first week, maybe into the second week of May. We have moved the goalposts back a little by 1 week this year compared to where we normally would, because this meeting will occur 1 week later than it normally does. It's the third Thursday in May, May 15th, instead of the second. So that means that to honor our commitment to you, we will get this budget to you on May 9th. Or thereabouts, but we want to try to always shoot for May 9th. And then Eric will present on May 15th. First reading is the last meeting in May, May 27th. Public hearing will be the first meeting in June, and third and final reading will be the last meeting in June. To Eric's point, there will be modifications potentially then as we get into the fiscal year, certainly as there always are. But we'll look at then, making appropriate budget amendments when necessary.
Any other questions or comments? If not, then let's go to item 6, financial report for second quarter of FY 2025. I do not see a Margaret here, so
Well,
must,
Mr. Chair,
must be you.
if I'm standing in for our comptroller today, Margaret Wilson, is part of her duties now include supporting our purchasing office, and she is at a purchasing conference today,
Okay.
supporting our purchasing team. So, but she has prepared or led the preparation of our quarterly reports, and she is with us certainly in spirit today. Before I do give some highlights to the second quarter report, I would like to just share with this committee that on March the 26th, the same day as the grand turning of ground for Bransford Park, earlier that same morning, we did close the Series 2025 general obligation bond issue that this committee spent quite a bit of time working on. So we did close that on March the 26th. That was $47.7 million toward 4 projects, primarily Bransford Park construction, but it also had funding for McEwen Phase 4 road improvements, fire apparatus replacement, and major road resurfacing. So while it may sound procedural, we always like to have a successful closing that's uneventful, and we did on the morning of March 26th. Now going on to our quarterly reports, the comments I'm going to make are primarily about general fund for the first 6 months of the fiscal year, and at the highest level, the revenues are up 3.3%. Our expenses were up just under 17%. That does not really tell the story of the fiscal year so far, so I wanted to share a couple highlights from my review. We certainly have revenues that are ahead of expenditures of $3.3 million. And this is the first quarter of the year. We always have expenses greater than revenues because we do have we have very few revenues in the first quarter. Property taxes do get billed in the second quarter. While they're not all collected at the end of December, they are all reflected as they're recorded for us in that second quarter. Sales taxes and property taxes are up for the year. Those are in accordance with budget. In fact, sales tax it's been a strong year for local option sales tax, about 6% higher than the same period last year. However, I do want to just highlight I would call them timing differences primarily, because last year we did have just under $10 million difference between revenues and expenditures at this point. But I would consider most of these timing or expected. The largest difference in looking at this year compared to last year was the timing of transfers to other funds. We've transferred $5 million more out of the general fund compared to the same period last year, and I believe that was primarily capital projects and the timing of capital projects. Last year, we had only sent, I think, about $1 million over out of the general fund at this point, and that was much higher this year. The second timing, as well as an increase in appropriation, was our transfer to closed pension. You'll recall that our closed pension contribution went up significantly. We went up by $3 million this fiscal year, and we do time that transfer to make the balance of that contribution from the employer contribution at the end of December. And so we contributed an extra $3 million end of December to close pension to the state of Tennessee's Department of Treasury, who does invest those funds for us. But we did make that payment because the closed pension does have a year-end date of December 31st. It does not match the fiscal year. And so that point in time of December 31st, we want to capture the entire contribution that has been appropriated by the board, and we do have the cash liquidity to do that. So we did send an extra $3 million to close pension compared to that same time last year. Our contribution to our open pension, the state pension plan, is actually made on a monthly basis. That's a requirement of the state. And while that's a much lower amount, that does occur monthly rather than in whatever timing that we in finance recommend to make those payments. And then finally, on the revenue side, I will point out that franchise fees are $1 million less for the first 6 months compared to last year. Those typically do get caught up because those are coming through the state, but there is a timing differential there, I would expect. So that I believe that explains most of the difference for the year so far. The other comment I would make, while it's a different fund, is the hotel motel fund, and hotel motel tax collections are 6% less than last year for the first 6 months. So I believe Eric he sits on committees and hears some of that same commentary, but we certainly our expenses in the hotel. One of the benefits of how we do have a separate hotel motel fund is we are not paying operations out of the hotel motel fund, so we don't pay salaries or utilities, bills like that out of hotel motel the way many local governments do. So we haven't actually had any capital expenditures so far, which is based on the timing of projects. So last year we actually did have capital expenditures for projects in the first 6 months of the year. So we've not incurred any difficulties with funding the appropriations because of that change. But certainly I know my colleagues in our budget group are looking at those actuals very closely as they refine budget projections for our new budget. If you have any questions, those were my comments about the quarterly report.
Any questions? If not, then let's go to the monthly reports.
And our monthly reports, I'm very, very proud to introduce, if you've not had a chance to talk to her yet, Lisa Gray. She's our financial manager in the finance department. Lisa, I believe you've been with us, I know,
6 months.
I was going to say 6 or 7 months now.
6 months.
6 months.
And we're very, very pleased to have Lisa leading our one section of our finance department. But she's also helps out when Margaret's away. So she is with us today to hit the highlights of our monthly reports.
Yes, I just have a couple of highlights. Sales tax is holding strong for the year, and street aid tax is equivalent to last year. And for the conference center, the gain of $167,881 is the largest gain that we've seen since October of 2018. That's all I have.
Any questions? Then I'll entertain the motion that is so favorable among us. Yeah. Second,
I will second.
second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Thank you, sir.